Hi everyone, this is Jed Shlackman, and for this video I'll be speaking about topics of density and toxicity and how we adapt to them, both as spiritual beings and human beings. When we use the word density, we tend to be speaking in terms of energy and vibration. So if you think of pure source energy or spiritual consciousness or light, it originates at a density level that's very clear or pure. So there isn't a heaviness to it, there's a pure lightness to it. It's as though there's no resistance, no separation, no burden there. Whereas here on the physical plane, we experience a lot of density. We experience darkness and pain and suffering and things that are seemingly unpleasant. So there's a wide span between the very highest density levels and the lower density levels, between the highest spiritual planes of existence and the physical plane of existence. So for a being that's only experienced the higher density levels or the lighter realms of being, it would be rather difficult to abruptly immerse oneself in these physical or denser levels of existence. It would be kind of like a shock to go from that level of pure light, of pure love and joy and beingness, into this plane of polarity, of deep contrast, of conflict, a place where there is pain and suffering. And similarly, if we look at the concept of toxicity, if you're in a very pure, clean environment, if you're not exposed much to any toxic burden, and then suddenly you're exposed to significant amounts of some toxic chemicals, some things that are very harsh or stressful, difficult for your system to process, that would be quite challenging and hard to adapt to. Initially, you could feel very disturbed or traumatized by the exposure to those toxins. Your system might be very much thrown out of balance by them, unprepared to handle them, and consequently they could make you quite sick or ill. You could think of an example of a child who has grown up in a pretty healthy environment, and then suddenly that child is exposed to someone smoking cigarettes, or someone gives that child some type of drug or alcohol to consume, and the initial reaction could be quite extreme. The child could have a severe allergy type reaction. The child might vomit or throw up, trying to quickly expel those poisons or chemicals that it's not really prepared to process. So in our lives, we may encounter various situations where we're being exposed to some significant amount of density or toxicity, and we're really not prepared at that time to process it. We don't have the experience of dealing with it, and we haven't developed some mechanism, some type of skill or process to cope with it. So we might have an extreme adverse reaction to it. Some type of trauma, in a sense, is occurring. So that happens both from a spiritual perspective and from a physical perspective. So as spiritual beings of light, when we descend into a dense realm that we're not accustomed to or used to, we may initially go through a lot of trauma, a lot of suffering and difficulty, because we're really not prepared to deal with that amount of density. We're kind of shocked and disturbed by what we're encountering, and we may initially want to run away or escape from that scenario. We may not want to deal with it at first. It may be so averse or so abhorrent to us from our higher density perspective. Only after a lot of experience are we usually able to really process things more fully and integrate those experiences and release whatever discomfort or stress we may have generated or encountered there. And this happens with toxicity as well. Over time, our body physically may develop the ability to process or handle the various toxins that it's exposed to, especially if that happens in a gradual process over time. So over time you might be exposed to heavier or denser foods, different processed foods and chemicals in your foods. You might gradually be exposed to different types of drugs, different types of chemicals in your environment, and your body develops some means of handling or managing those chemicals. So it might start storing them up in its fat tissues. It might develop some means of releasing or clearing them out of its system. So different pathways of elimination may get strengthened. Different organs may develop a greater ability to handle toxins. And this is something that, like I said, may develop over time. So initially you might feel overwhelmed or overburdened by those exposures, but eventually whatever organism is exposed to things is likely to develop some mechanisms, some resources to handle those stresses or challenges, those forms of adversity that it is exposed to. So this is something that we can all be conscious of or keep in mind as we encounter different challenges in our lives, whether we have encountered physical forms of toxicity or various forms of psychological adversity, forms of energetic or spiritual density. Over time, we will develop the strength, the skills and abilities to process these things, to get through them, and in a sense to become even more stronger and more powerful, to be able to deal with the adversities and challenges that we encounter. And as we develop those resources, as we gain those abilities, we'll carry them forward. We'll be even more empowered as creative beings to overcome whatever is presented in our path, in a sense. So it's been said that we're never provided with something that we're not going to have the resources or abilities to handle or deal with. And perhaps that's a half-truth. We may not initially be able to effectively or successfully process something, but over time we will eventually develop those resources or abilities. I hope that this discussion has given each of you some things to ponder or think about, and has given you some hope or optimism perhaps that whatever challenges you've been encountering you'll find the resources that will enable you to process them or work through them. Ultimately, we all come from an infinite source, and at its essence, that source may seem to be pure light. It may have no density in a sense. It has no toxicity. It's just pure light or pure awareness, a pure desire to create, to share, to embrace all of existence. So that's where we could think of the idea of love. So that infinite sharing, giving, and receiving. And ultimately, we're not separate from that source, but we have descended into this realm of polarity where we encounter the experience of density and the experience of having to face or handle various forms of toxicity. But trust that you will be able to make it through this, and this is part of what we've all chosen as spiritual beings. We've chosen to project our consciousness into these denser levels, denser layers of being. And through the mastery of these more challenging experiences, we actually become more powerful co-creators. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, in a sense. There is a potential that lies present in what you are currently experiencing and what you are going through. You are evolving and becoming a more powerful being, and nothing that you're encountering is truly random or by accident. There's ultimately nothing to resist, nothing to reject about your life. It's all there to serve part of a higher purpose, to help propel you forward on your spiritual journey. I appreciate each of you for taking your time to view this video, to watch this presentation, and for those that are interested in holistic health and spiritual healing and well-being, I invite you to watch some more of my YouTube videos, as well as to visit my website, which is phinsights.com. That's phinsights.com. For now, I'd like to wish everyone a wonderful day. Namaste.